Fuzzy Mud by Louis Sachar, Chapter 13, Disaster Warning. Excerpted from the Secret Senate Hearings. Professor Alice Mayfair. When I was born in 1975, there were 4 billion people living in the world. That's a lot. 100 years ago, there were less than 2 billion. But today, as I speak to this committee, there are more than 7 billion of us. Senator Foote. What does this have to do with Bioline? Professor Alice Mayfair. More than 300,000 babies are born every single day, day after day after day. Every one of them will need food, water, and energy. Senator Foote. Exactly why this country needs Bioline. Senator Wright. Excuse me, Professor, it was my understanding you were going to testify about possible disasters that could result from the man-made organisms being introduced into the environment. It sounds to me like you are in favor of Bioline. Professor Alice Mayfair. Oh, there will be disasters, whether from Bioline or something else, who knows? By the year 2050, an additional 2 billion people will inhabit this planet. 9 billion! Senator Foote. Which is why we need Bioline. Professor Alice Mayfair. Unless we do something to control world population, nothing will help us, Senator. Not Bioline, not super-duper crops and fertilizers, not colonies on Mars. Senator Wright. Let me get this straight. You want us to keep people from having too many babies all over the world? Professor Alice Mayfair. Yes. Senator March. I'm afraid that's just a bit beyond the scope of this committee. Chapter 14, Wednesday, November 3rd, 9:40 a.m. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, the students in Miss Filbert's class had to write in their journals. Sometimes she let them write about whatever they wanted, but more often she gave them a prompt. Timea preferred the prompts. It was strange, but she found it harder to think of something to write when she could write about anything in the world. Most everyone else always moaned and groaned when they heard the prompts. It didn't seem to matter what the prompts were. Some people just liked to complain. Today, Miss Filbert wrote the prompt on the whiteboard, then said it out loud. How to blow up a balloon. Along with the usual moans and groans, there were a lot of huhs and whats. Hands were raised all around Timea. I don't get it, Jason spoke without raising his hand. You just stick it into your mouth and blow. Oh, you mean like this? Asked Miss Filbert. Timea watched wide-eyed as her teacher took a red balloon and placed the whole thing inside her mouth. Miss Filbert took a big breath, then blew, spitting the balloon out onto the floor. Everyone laughed, including Timea. She smiled at Hope, who sat next to her, then tried to catch Monica's eye on the other side of the room. Monica was looking back at her, sharing her amazement. Miss Filbert scratched her head, as if she were greatly confused. That didn't work, she said. No, you don't put the whole balloon in your mouth, said Jason, again without raising his hand. Just one end. Miss Filbert slapped herself on the forehead. Well, why didn't you say that in the first place? She chose another balloon, and this time put only one end into her mouth. The wrong end. No, the other end, called Monica. Miss Filbert turned the balloon around. Now blow, said Monica. Once again, Miss Filbert spit the balloon onto the floor. All around Timea, kids were shouting instructions, trying to tell Miss Filbert what she had done wrong. Others were repeating to their friends what they'd just seen, even though their friends had just seen it too. Miss Filbert held up 2 fingers and waited for everyone to quiet down. Don't tell me, she said. Write it. Pretend that what you write is going to be read by someone who never ever saw a balloon before in her whole life. And she's none too bright neither. Miss Filbert knocked on the side of her head as if testing to see if it were hollow. Timea laughed. Her mind was already working on how to blow up a balloon instructions. So, your instructions have to be clear and precise, Miss Filbert continued. Later, you can read them aloud, and we'll see how many balloons I manage to inflate. The complainers were moaning and groaning again, but Timea was up for the challenge. She picked up her pencil, thought a moment, then wrote, "You start with a flat balloon. You want to fill it with air from your lungs." The rest of the class was still buzzing about their teachers spitting balloons. From across the aisle, Hope tapped Timea on the shoulder. "What happened to your sweater?" she whispered. Timea's heart sank. She'd hoped it wasn't so noticeable. "What do you mean?" she whispered back. "It's all torn." Timea shrugged. "Who cares?" she said, trying to prove she wasn't the goody two-shoes that Hope thought she was. She returned to her journal, reread what she had written, and then added, "Look for the end with the hole." No, she didn't like that. A hole was the last thing you want in a balloon. For all she knew, Miss Filbert might stick a pin into the balloon just to put a hole in there. She tried to think of what else to call it. The knobby round thing? She tried to erase what she had written, but instead made an ugly gray smudge on her paper. Timea's pages were always clean and neat, and she had excellent handwriting. She tried rubbing harder, but not hard enough to tear the page. A red drop fell on top of the smudge. At first, Timea was more worried about her journal being ruined than anything else, but when she looked at her hand, she was horrified to see it was covered with blisters and blood. She dropped her pencil. It rolled across her journal, leaving a red track behind it, then continued across her desk and fell to the floor. "Miss Filbert!" called Hope. "Timea's all bloody!" 2 times 256 equals 512. 2 times 512 equals 1024.